This is the story of a man who dedicated his life not only to fighting sati, the burning of widows, but social evil in all its manifestations. His admirers and detractors alike are at least agreed that he was the first modern Indian, the torch-bearer of the Indian Renaissance. His name, Ram Mohan Roy. In the words of Rabindranath Tagore, he was born at a time when our country, having lost its link with the inmost truths of its being, struggled under a crushing load of unreason in abject slavery to circumstance. In social usage, in politics, in the realm of religion and art, we had entered the zone of uncreative habit, of decadent tradition, and ceased to exercise our humanity. Historically, the date of Ram Mohan Roy's birth, the 22nd of May, 1772, is also important, as it was in that year that the East India Company put an end to the sham of operating under the Mughal umbrella and took over direct power under Warren Hastings. Ram Mohan Roy was born in the village of Radhanagar, where his father was a rich landlord. His family were Kulin, the highest order of Brahmins. His grandfather was chief of different districts during the rule of Muhabbat Jung, Nawab of Murshidabad. His father, Ramakant Roy, was referred to by the collector of Burdwan as a man of property whose revenue was lakhs of rupees, the most respectable man in the district. Ram Mohan Roy's memories are sometimes revealed in sketches he wrote for an autobiography. The painful nature of his personal life. He was married at the age of 9. The child bride died, and 2 other wives were found for the little boy. He was educated at home and at the local school. The tragedy of his early education was that Hindu society had discarded the acharyas, the truly learned men, in favor of temple priests who recited only dogma and at the most taught only arithmetic. Ram Mohan was sent to Patna to study Arabic and Persian, which was the language of administration. It is difficult, when dealing with genius, to trace definite influences, because genius seems to have, in all ages, an intuitive grasp of a particular truth. But it seems likely that the monotheism of the Quran and the mystical Sufi belief of the oneness of man may have influenced Ram Mohan. Whatever the cause, when he returned to Radhanagar, there was a confrontation between father and son. Ram Mohan told his father that idolatry was the basic disease of the Hindu religion. His father reasoned with him, saying that idols were symbols. He tried to explain the philosophical basis of Hindu religious worship. But as his father Ramakant has recorded, whenever I spoke to my son, he always had a kintu, meaning but. And this kintu, this but, was that Ram Mohan Roy was not prepared to tolerate idolatry at all, indeed any religious symbolism which in any way diluted the idea of one God, and only one God for all of creation. Ram Mohan left home and wandered throughout India. He even went to Tibet and studied Buddhism. Finally, he came to Banaras, where he studied Sanskrit, the Vedas and the Upanishads, and he came to the conclusion that Vedanta reinforced his perception of monotheism. The entire heritage of man, it seemed to him, pointed to one root, one tree, whose branches shelter all of humanity under one God. Unlike Akbar, who had tried to create a Deen-e-Ilahi, a fusion of all religions, and failed, Ram Mohan brought to the problem reasoned, scientific, and erudite thinking. He wrote and published his first book, Tuhfat-ul-Muwahhideen, a gift to monotheists, in Persian. The publication of his book resulted in the Muslims of Bengal claiming that Ram Mohan Roy was a Zabardast Maulvi, one of the ulema of Islam. Obviously, this concept of the unity of all religions leading to one God was unpalatable to Orthodox Hindus. Together with monotheism, Ram Mohan thought of social unity. At this troubled time in India's history, there entered into Ram Mohan Roy's life an English administrative officer, John Digby by name. John Digby replaced Thomas Woodford, with whom Ram Mohan had already discussed the European scientific outlook and the basic tenets of Western humanism. John Digby was amazed to discover that Ram Mohan Roy had already read Voltaire, Locke, Hume, and others. In his quiet way, Digby accepted as his equal his Munshi, his head clerk, a man so keen to search after truth. Digby marveled that he had read all the major scriptures in the original, both in terms of monotheism and the various pantheons. During their discussions, by now they had become good friends, Digby encouraged Ram Mohan to translate Vedanta into Bengali and English. In the many conversations with Digby, often late into the night, when East and West together searched for truth, began to emerge the Ram Mohan Roy known to the world. As Max Muller was later to say, Ram Mohan Roy was the first to complete a connected life current between the East and the West. After Digby left for England, Ram Mohan Roy was alone. With considerable study and thought, he began to anticipate a solution to the problems of nationalism and communalism. He was sure that by eliminating religious barriers, India could achieve social progress. Although many people thought that Ram Mohan Roy was a dreamer, he pointed out to his contemporary Brahmins that it was they who suffered from dreams of errors. And he was so persuasive that he never needed to argue. What might have been debate became gentle conversation. And suddenly many of his contemporaries realized that here was a combination of belief and action. They listened to him in a circle which he founded, the Atmiya Sabha. Among his close associates and friends were Brindan Mitra, Braj Mohan Mazumdar, Nand Kishore Bose, and Dwarkanath Tagore, the grandfather of Rabindranath Tagore. He remembered the advice of his friend John Digby, write and again write. He translated the Vedantic philosophy into Bengali and English, from which several generations of Bengalis and Indians were to benefit. The English edition of Vedanta Sar created a profound impression in Europe and America, where the transcendentalists were greatly influenced. Indeed, some years later, Jeremy Bentham was to refer to Ram Mohan Roy as the most enlightened man of his time. In consonance with his sense of universality, Ram Mohan Roy introduced non-Indian words into the Bengali language. Purity of language was a bogey which he decried. Language changes as society changes, as man changes. Everything does not need to be in Sanskrit. The language of the village can be the language of a nation. Ram Mohan Roy was, in fact, the first writer of prose in Bengali. He wrote a grammar of the Bengali language. Much of Ram Mohan Roy's vision was embodied in Rabindranath. As Tagore himself said about Ram Mohan Roy, India's special genius has been to acknowledge the divine in human affairs, to offer hospitality to all that is imperishable in human civilization. Ram Mohan Roy fought against the barbarism of sati. He had seen his brother's widow forced onto the funeral pyre. Very few women immolated themselves willingly. The cruelty was agonizing. In his long and arduous struggle, he finally persuaded Lord Bentinck to ignore orthodox susceptibilities, and finally, in 1829, the custom of sati was abolished by law. Ram Mohan Roy fought for equal rights for women and for widow remarriage. Ram Mohan Roy was equally at home in Hebrew, Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, and Arabic. In the history of theology, such a linguist was very rare. Because of his conviction of monotheism, he also took issue with Christian missionaries. If God is one, why emphasize the Trinity? People will not understand so esoteric a concept. Why not speak of only one God? In the quiet precincts of a church in Calcutta, Ram Mohan Roy was reaching out to the Unitarians of America. Emerson and Thoreau were moved by Ram Mohan's works. The precepts of Jesus and an appeal to the Christian public were cogent arguments in favor of one God, shorn of dogma and ritual and superstition. Ram Mohan Roy was the only Indian of his time to realize completely the significance of the modern age. He knew that the ideal of human civilization does not lie in the isolation of independence, but in the brotherhood of interdependence. And if we want to introduce science into an educational system, then language is not important. It is the content that matters. He was the first Indian to establish modern scientific education in English in the country, which subsequently led to the colleges and universities which we enjoy today. The scientific and social outlook, however strong, did not take away from Ram Mohan Roy's awareness of political realities. He admired the American War of Independence, the French Revolution, the struggle of the Irish for freedom, or a state like Naples wanting freedom from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Greece wanting freedom from Turkey. Indeed, so significant were his views that they were incorporated in the Constitution of Spain. The Spanish Constitution specifically acknowledged the importance of Ram Mohan Roy as a citizen of the world. Who would have thought that 150 years ago there was a man who advocated the abolition of passports and the creation of a United Nations? Here was a man who believed in world government. Oh yes, he was aware of the international concern aroused by his ideas, but he realized that he must first put his ideas into practice at home. Are we going to be birds in a cage? All ideas lead to one God, the Creator. That is why Ram Mohan Roy is regarded as the founder of the Brahmo Samaj, a non-sectarian religion, inviting people to congregate without distinction of caste and creed, and with a single purpose, to worship the Eternal. That he was called Raja is almost irrelevant. A khitab, a title, given to him by the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, who appointed him his personal envoy to Great Britain. For he was, after all, the Raja of a great spiritual vision. He was the Raja of the search of the Indian people for freedom. He died on the 27th of September, 1833, at Bristol, in England. We might ask ourselves, what is the relevance of this biography to the India of today, in this India in which we suffer casteism, communalism, regionalism? Perhaps the answer is to be found not in the mouths of politicians, but in the words of Tagore in remembrance of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. If we do not observe perfect equity of human relationships, offering uncompromising fight to all forms and conventions, however ancient they may be in usage, which separate man and man, we shall be pitiful in our failure and shamed forever in the history of man.